OECD. All of these are not small steps, and they reflect a choice that anchor Uzbekistan's investment environment in internationally recognized standards. Our conversation today will look at what that means in practice from the perspectives of people who work in responsible business conduct. So we'll have my colleague Grégory Lecomte, who will be presenting the key findings of our recent work on investment policy, looking in particular at responsible business conduct. We'll have a representative, Mr. Tengiz Asanov from the Ministry of Investment, Industry and Trade, who will highlight the ministry's key short-term objectives in terms of RBC implementation. Mr. Cheon Ho will speak from Korea's experience with the national contact point and how OECD standards and tools help companies meet responsible business conduct or ESG expectations. Mrs. Vera Bell from CRO Uzbekistan will share the perspective of companies operating in Uzbekistan and how they implement RBC practices on the ground. Last but not least, Mr. Yuri Stuk, Senior Coordinator for Uzbekistan at the International Labour Organization, will also share the ILO's perspective on how the respect for international labor standards and the promotion of responsible business conduct contribute to strengthening investor confidence. Mr. Kirill Korotkov will be our last speaker and will tell us from an investor's perspective what concrete signals make the biggest difference when committing capital in terms of RBC standards. Thank you very much. Again, I will now give the floor to my colleague Grégory. Grégory, so you were involved in the roadmap for investment, sustainable investment policy reforms with the government. Can you tell us how RBC standards can help translate tangible investment benefits and highlight some of the key recommendations on RBC under this roadmap that Uzbekistan and the OECD collaborated on? Grégory, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Celeste. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. So, countries want to attract investment because this investment contributes to development. But this contribution is not automatic. You need quality investment or investment that creates impact. We can think of what impact means. So what does that mean? We include in this concept job creation, increased productivity, transfer of skills or technology. But impact also means that the businesses don't contribute to adverse impact, such as violations of labor rights, corruption, or harm to natural resources. That's exactly what responsible business conduct, or RBC, is about. Preventing and addressing negative impacts of business activities, and if possible, enabling their contribution to sustainable development. So RBC is here to help ensure that each investment will provide the impact you seek. But by creating an enabling policy environment for RBC, you also help attract quality FDI because, as Celeste was saying, more and more investors strive to observe RBC principles and standards and want to operate in markets that set clear expectations for businesses. This is why at the OECD, in fact, responsible business conduct is a central component of our standards, and it's part of what we call the OECD policy framework for investment, and also the OECD recommendation on FDI quality. So RBC is central to these two OECD standards. RBC benefits also of international recognition, and I will give a very concrete case in the critical mineral sector, which is very fashionable these days. Importance of RBC in critical minerals. Two examples. European Union Critical Raw Materials Act enables support for strategic raw materials projects. But one condition to benefit from this support is to manage adverse impacts. And in this context, the regulation references several OECD RBC standards. Another example is on the London Bullion Market Association, which sets industry standards for the refining and trading of precious metals, such as gold. This standard, LBMA standard on responsible sourcing, also reference OECD due diligence standards that come from RBC. So these RBC standards are central to OECD, but also to international sector-specific regulation. Now coming to Uzbekistan specifically. We have delivered this work already more than a year ago, the roadmap for sustainable investment policy reform, which benefited from ADB and EU financing. This roadmap provides an assessment of Uzbekistan investment policy framework. It provides also recommendations on the investment law, on tax incentives, and on RBC. I will focus here on the findings for RBC. What does it tell us about Uzbekistan? First, this analysis recognizes that Uzbekistan is making efforts to promote and enable RBC. In particular, improvement in the framework for labor rights, and one example is the fight against violation in cotton farming. This is the most famous example of the last years. Two is that the government is also promoting environmental, social, and governance risk, ESG risk management in SOEs. And three, government is also making effort to strengthen compliance with environmental standards. Now, coming to the gaps or the recommendations, what did we identify? First is to coordinate better across the governments, across the different ministries and government bodies, promote RBC in a more even way across government bodies. Two is to involve civil society in this process and businesses, so it shouldn't be a top-down exercise, but a more inclusive and consultative process. Three is to raise awareness of RBC to businesses themselves, because sometimes businesses are not aware of the existence of these standards, and we suggest, for instance, to include provision on RBC in the national SME strategy. Four, we also suggest to promote greater compliance with labor, human rights, and environmental standards, and provide an effective access to remedy, for example, by ensuring effectiveness of inspection or increasing attention to social aspects in impact assessments. We encourage, of course, RBC through SOEs. SOEs is an easy way to promote RBC since SOEs are owned by the government. And in general, we warmly welcome Uzbekistan's commitment to follow up on these recommendations. And today's panel, in fact, is an indication of this interest. Very significantly, earlier this year, and Celeste was mentioning it, Uzbekistan submitted a request to adhere to the OECD Declaration on International Investments and Multinational Enterprises. These guidelines, this declaration are international instruments to push for RBC, and we are celebrating at the end of this month the 50th years anniversary of these RBC guidelines at the OECD in Paris. They have been updated in 50 years, but this is an important milestone for us. I want to flag that an important requirement for adherence is the creation of a national contact point, a so-called NCP. And I'm quite happy, in fact, to see in this panel representatives from NCP in Korea. He can share his perspective and experience on what does that mean to be a national contact point for RBC. We hope that the adherence process that is forthcoming will create further momentum for Uzbekistan's efforts to promote RBC. And we hope also that this process, and this is very important, will be inclusive and engage all stakeholders, not only a government process, but civil society included and business inclusive process. So I'm very much looking forward to the discussion, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gregory. I would now like to turn to Mr. Tengiz Hasanov, Head of Department at the Ministry of Investment, Industry and Trade. Tengiz, we just heard Gregory mention a few of the recommendations from the roadmap, including on responsible business conduct. Could you tell us about the ministry's short-term priorities to advance the RBC agenda?
Thank you for the question. This is a very important question, and I'm really glad that we together meet here and discuss this important issue. And I think that responsible business conduct as a general concept is very important for investors community as well as for a recipient country. And in this regard, Uzbekistan is just in the beginning of its way to join this very important concept for investors and for the state. So yes, we've done remarkable work together with the OECD, and I'm really thankful for this cooperation because we have an integrated approach to interaction now. And we already mentioned our commitment to join the declaration on international investments and M&Es. So this is very important benchmark for us to join the community of countries which adhere to principles of responsible business conduct, ESG, and other standards and advanced practices which foreign investors will follow in Uzbekistan. And this roadmap for sustainable investment policy reforms, otherwise called investment policy review, we've done this project together with OECD last year. We accomplished it for the first time for Uzbekistan, and we approached this review having a roadmap as a result to have recommendations and directions to follow to improve our investment climate in Uzbekistan. And that roadmap covers 9 core directions. That includes legal framework for investments. An example would be drafting a new investment law on investments and investment activities in Uzbekistan, which we will take further to bring it to investment code now. So, and a number of other areas relating to green economy, investment and trade nexus, and of course responsible business conduct, which is a separate chapter in this roadmap and which lays down very important issues, principles and directions for Uzbekistan to follow. And of course we know that Uzbekistan has progressed quite a lot on a number of points or issues of responsible business conduct, which are laid down in the Declaration on Adherence and on the guidelines on responsible business conduct by OECD. And that includes, of course, issues relating to labor rights protection, environmental issues, and some other very important issues which are under consideration and work by investors working in Uzbekistan. So in the first, so we've done quite a lot of things to introduce RBC and ESG in Uzbekistan, but now we're coming to a moment when we are ready to work together with OECD and other partners, ILO and other organizations to make practical steps to implement those recommendations in Uzbekistan. And roadmap as such with its recommendations will be a guiding point for us to go further. And for us, we have several short-term both and mid-term tasks and priorities in terms of implementing RBC in Uzbekistan. And first is to strengthen our institutional framework and regulatory framework on responsible business conduct in Uzbekistan. And I think that our commitment to join a declaration on adherence and guidelines on RBC will reinforce our commitment. And in this regard, we drafted a regulatory normative act. It's a presidential decree on implementation of responsible business conduct standards in Uzbekistan. And we've done it jointly with our colleagues from ministries and agencies, our partners, foreign investors community. Ms. Verabel is present here, and she actually leads this work under the Foreign Investors Council work, dedicated work to responsible business conduct. We have a working group, and she leads this process, and I express my special thanks because they've done quite a good job to assess our current standing on RBC. In RBC, in responsible business context, we have 9 main directions. Those are, human rights, competition, environment, corporate governance, taxation, innovation, technologies, and science, and some other issues. In total, there are 9 directions. So we work together closely with investors, led by Ms. Verabel, and we heard a lot from them. We met, we had a number of meetings. Thank you again for organizing them and for active participation. We heard voices from the private sector, from investors, and from the government side, from the ministries and agencies. So we came up with a legal document, a draft document, which reflects our approach to implementing responsible business conduct in Uzbekistan. And the main idea we are pursuing is to introduce responsible business conduct in Uzbekistan by welcoming, by encouraging investors and players rather than creating some rigid, strict rules or maybe requirements or barriers. So we would like to incentivize their desire to follow RBC, and that would include some schemes to support, like grants to those who actually implement RBC reporting or having ratings in sustainability ratings by other organizations. So we provide for that, and we would like to have an attractive environment for investors to follow, and in general also for local players, for local businesses to introduce these practices in their activities by incentivizing. And most importantly, as already Gregory noted, we are looking to establish national contact point in Uzbekistan. So this is an institutional element which will serve as a point where voices of private sector, investors, and the government will be heard and actually handled. We would like to have claims assessed by this national contact point and addressed via the network of national contacts worldwide, led and managed by the OECD. So this is also a very important element, and we include it into this presidential decree, the draft, and we will follow it. Also, another priority for us to ensure that due diligence is present in business processes of companies, and mainly related to issues of supply chain. Uzbekistan is a double landlocked country. We all know well about it. And for us, it is important to expand our geography of exports, and at the same time to make sure that our export commodities meet all the standards which are outside Uzbekistan. And of course, that would relate to adherence to practices that our experts are very clean, in parentheses, and meeting requirements. So we will work on that, and we would like to have businesses due diligence introduced and tested, and that's what we are also including in our draft regulation with roadmaps there. to test it, to introduce it, to have some feedback from all those concerned parties. And another priority, we know that raising awareness among businesses and other stakeholders is very important. So we will be stressing work on communicating, disseminating knowledge about RBC and businesses to know and follow. So this is also very important element of our RBC implementation. So this is in brief what we are doing now at the moment, but we have a lot of work ahead of us because this RBC node is a very integrated and complex issue which actually encompasses many issues in it. And we are having an approach when we will be having working groups led by line ministries and agencies and also private sector and businesses. And we will be working on all other issues which are to be resolved, reviewed, and implemented. So I hope that our work will be supported by all our partners and especially OECD. And we're very thankful because this year is an anniversary of responsible business conduct guidelines, and there will be important events in headquarters. And I think Uzbekistan will take a special position for discussions there, and we hope for future cooperation and very close work with all our partners, including international organizations, ILO, and our investors, our friends. So this is in brief what we have at the moment and what we will want to have in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tengiz. So I heard several priorities, including awareness raising, strengthening the regulatory framework, encouraging rather than restricting RBC responsible business conduct, and also an important mention about supply chain resilience and how to make export compliant with RBC standards. Thank you very much. I would now like to turn to Mr. Ji-Hon Ho, who is attorney at law and also the Korean National Contact Point for RBC. Mr. Ho, Korean companies are managing international responsible business conduct expectations both as investors abroad and within global value chains. Based on your experience as national contact point in engaging with Korean companies, how can OECD standards and tools help companies meet responsible business conduct or ESG expectations in practice? Mr. Ho, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would you turn? Thank you. Let me introduce myself a bit. I'm working in a law firm, one law partners located in Seoul, but also I'm appointed as a committee member of Korean NCP, National Contact Point. And since 2023, I'm working for the Korean NCP up to now, and it was a very wonderful journey to be with be a part of Korean NCP. Have you ever heard about the National Contact Point before? Anyone? Yeah, it's not familiar. Even in Korea, it's started up in 2001 officially. And as the Gregory mentioned earlier, the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises is established in 1976. It's been 50 years. And in case of Korea, we joined the OECD association in 1996, 30 years ago. So it's in our perspective, it's 30th anniversary of being a member of OECD this year. So it's very meaningful. But even in Korea, the NCP is not that familiar up to now. why? Why the NCP is not that popular? Because ESG and RBC is a bit provides some discomfort for the business world because now is time of the wave of ESG and RBC is coming up just in front of us, but before that, before COVID era, it's not that familiar. So let me go through the body, the Korean National Contact Point at first, and then move on to the more details. Let's start with the background. Back in the 2000, the OECD decided to every adhering country must establish the national contact point to effectively implement the guidelines. And following that mandate, in case of Korea, 2001, the Korea's Ministry of Trade, which is historically known as the MOTI before, it publicly announced the operational rules for the Korean NCP. And now, why does the Trade Ministry oversee this? There is the reason. The reason is highly strategic. The core aim of a Korean OECD guideline is twofold: to improve the foreign investment and to enhance the contribution of multinational corporations to sustainable development. So by anchoring the Korean NCP within MOTI, the Korean Responsible Ministry, Korea ensures that the responsible business conduct is directly woven into the fabric of our industrial and trade policy. Let's go overview the current situation, the structure of Korean NCP. Now let's look at the organization's architecture of our Korean NCP, which is a very great example of partnership between the public and private. That's the kind of our merit and our certain strong point. And there are many types of NCP among diverse countries, but we choose to make this body as a public-private partnership. That's the point. So at the top, we have a Korean NCP committee consisting of a chairman, who is a high-ranked officer in Ministry of Trade, and up to 8 non-standing members. These members are split equally between the public and private sectors, 4-4, and the 4 government members representing key ministries: first, trade, and second, employment, and third, the climate, energy, and environment. So balancing them out are 4 non-governmental experts appointed from law firms and academic institutions, like me. And this ensures that the legal balance and like specialized industry insights are always present in the decision-making process of Korean NCP. Supporting this committee is advisory board, which is newly developed last year. It's quite new body, and which is located outside the Korean NCP. And it featured 7 stakeholders representing business, labor, and civil society, such as Federation of Korean Industries, which is the representative association of Korean businessmen, and Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, and UN Global Compact as well. So this kind of diverse makeup guarantees the multi-stakeholder perspective are integrated into the Korean NCP's oversight and operations. So, yep. And one of the key point of the Korean NCP is, which is very unique, is Korean government, the Ministry of Trade, designated the KCAB, the Korean Commercial Arbitration Board, KCB, as a KNCP Secretariat. Why is this is important? And someone says it's kind of a game changer of Korean NCP history. As an attorney and also specialized in arbitration, I see firsthand how vital the neutrality and specialized insights are in dispute resolution. Because NCP is dealing with cases we call specific instance. I will explain it later. And because the KNCP operates under a government agency that naturally promotes the trade and investment. And so housing the secretariat inside the government it can bring the kind of conflict of interest. So, and Korean Commercial Arbitration Board, KCAB, is Korea's only sole institution specializing in commercial mediation and arbitration. So KNCP secured the professionalism and strict impartiality, neutrality, and robust platform to strengthen its efficiency and effectiveness. So, so how this kind of system actually work in practice? And the Korean NCP follows a clear, structured procedure. It begins. It begins with a receipt of specific instance. Let me check this one here. So when we receive the specific instance complaint from the complainant, then we review and we go through the initial assessment firsthand. And if it passes this stage, the case refers to a specialized mediation committee, typically consisting of 3 to 5 members, including external member, who are experts in certain industry and certain cases. Here, the Korean NCP offers its good office function and mediation to help the parties to find the common ground. From there, the process concludes in one of 3 ways. First, if a resolution reached and find the mutual ground, then official announcement is made detailing the agreement. Otherwise, if the parties cannot agree, then Korean National Contact Point issues an official recommendation, official opinion to guide the enterprise toward compliance toward OECD guidelines. And finally, the formal statement is published and open to public and also reported to the headquarters of OECD and after the entire conclusion of this procedure. This is our website, Korean NCP, and on the right is a web page of Korean NCP LinkedIn. So you can find the website and LinkedIn, also Instagram. We have an Instagram ID. So to wrap up my introduction of Korean NCP, as the global ESG regulation tighten and climate change and energy law become central to corporate strategy, Korean NCP stands as a vital mechanism. Our motto, it's written in Korean, I will translate: companies that respect people and the earth and society will lead the future. That's our motto and agenda for the future. For business, navigating this landscape, understanding this structure and procedure isn't just about the compliance procedure. It's about building long-term and so sustainable value for the future. Thank you for listening my introduction of Korean SAP, and afterwards I'm very happy to open any questions you might have from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tihon, and thank you for describing in concrete details the procedure for receiving a complaint and assessing it. And I also found particularly interesting that the Korean National Contact Point plays a very important role on alternative dispute resolution and mediation. Just on a more general note, think of a national contact point as a bridge between government, the private sector, and civil society that ensures companies don't just chase profits, but also follow labor rights and regulations, uphold environmental standards, and avoid corruption wherever they operate. With that being said, I would now like to turn to Mrs. Vera Bell, who is managing partner at CRO Uzbekistan and who also leads the working group on RBC at the Foreign Investors Council. Mrs. Bell, from the perspective of companies in Uzbekistan, how are OECD RBC standards already shaping business practices, and where are firms facing challenges, and how can they be addressed? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good day, everyone. I have a question for the audience. How many of you are from the private businesses? Please raise your hands. Thank you. Because I'm sure that it is very symbolic that we are here today, exactly 1 year since the introduction of RBC and the decree on the Foreign Investors Council, when the working group on RBC was introduced, and why it happened, and why Ministry of Investment is in charge. Not because they want investors with RBC practices to come to Uzbekistan, because they want to make Uzbek companies to become investable, and they want Uzbek companies to gain the access to the cheaper capital. Because as we all know, with any project, doesn't matter which one, implementation is the key. And when we talk about implementation, how to implement the reform is one thing. How to make it successful, how to make private businesses to follow that, you need to make it profitable. And when we talk about businesses, private businesses in particular, it is not enough to get good EBITDA, because you understand it better than us, I think, consultants. When you are talking with a partner and you ask the financials, is it enough? When you will have a choice, who do you work with? It is always important to understand your partner, and what is more important, to have the trust. And the reports show that trust is the most valuable currency at the moment. It is very interesting to hear that, but it is the matter of the fact. And who do you trust? You trust the partner who is transparent. You are sure about the principles they use when they conduct their activity. And when we talk about challenges, the major challenge which I see for the Uzbek companies is, of course, to understand what RBC is. Because in Uzbekistan, we did the research. Many of RBC principles proposed by OECD are already existing in the country. So the companies need to understand, do they really need to make the changes? What will be the changes? What is important to follow? Because we know that some of the standards are already existing, being a good taxpayer, follow the labor legislation, supply chain. All the major standards are already in the country, so the businesses need to understand what it is, and then the government, in order to promote those who follow the standards, are going to create so-called the register for RBC compliant businesses. And as Tengiz mentioned already, what is important to understand that first of all, it is not going to be just a tick box when you can tick it and that's it. Because nowadays, and being an auditor myself, every policy could be checked via numbers. Because if you tell, okay, we follow the ESG policies of our business, nowadays there are special standards, yes, in IFRS, and we are making the reform in Uzbekistan, and you know that starting January 2027, the new national accounting standards will be implemented, and you will see there that it is not only having the policy, but how having that policy is shown in the real numbers in your financial statements. This is what would be checked. And then the government is going to introduce the principles of due diligence, also based and in compliance with OECD requirements. So you can be checked if you operate based on RBC standards. And then some incentives as cheaper capital, as more opportunities for you to do business with larger international companies are going to be introduced. So the good news for the private businesses of Uzbekistan, that it is not going to be something like another tax checks, yes. It is going to be the reform which will help you to run your business with the more access, as I said, to the capital and with the more opportunities. So this is what it is going to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bell, for highlighting the concrete strong points of implementing RBC standards for businesses, including cheaper access to capital. I would now like to turn to Mr. Yuri Shtek, who is Senior Coordinator for Uzbekistan at the International Labour Organization. Mr. Shtek, from the ILO's perspective, how do respect for international labour standards and the promotion of responsible business conduct in line with international frameworks such as the ILO MNE Declaration or the OECD Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises on RBC? So how do these contribute to strengthening investor confidence and enhancing the quality of foreign direct investment? The floor is yours.
Works, yes. Thank you, Celeste, for this question. And first of all, before going straight to what you have asked me about, let me introduce what we mean by ILO perspective. I think it's good to understand what this perspective is in order to understand what is the viewpoint of ILO and the role of ILO in ensuring compliance, best possible compliance with RBC and with international labor standards, which we consider to be part of the RBC, broadly speaking. But first of all, I will also ask the question whether you know what ILO is about and what this organization is doing. First of all, let me stress that this is one of the oldest international organizations, been established already in the aftermath of World War I, some 107 years ago. And this organization has profiled over the decades as a standard-setting organization, which establishes worldwide standards in the area of labor rights. So these are known as international labor standards, and their incarnation are the conventions and recommendations adopted under the auspices of the International Labour Organization. This being said, another specific feature of the International Labour Organization is that it is founded and functions on the basis of the so-called tripartism. Tripartism means that in the functioning of the organizations are involved not only governments that have established ILO, as I mentioned, over a century ago, but also representatives of workers and employers' organizations. And this is how the ILO functions, and this is how international labor standards are being developed and established and adopted within this organization. And apart from being an organization that sets standards and monitors how they are implemented, over the past half of century, ILO has also developed as a policy supporting organization and capacity building organization, which supports the development of reliable policies in the countries of the member states and supports the building of capacities to address the obligation of member states under the ILO conventions that establish compulsory binding norms in the area of labor rights. Now, this being said, of course, it is clear why governments and to a certain extent workers' organizations are interested in ensuring compliance with international labor standards. The question is, what would be the interest of employers, of enterprises, of corporations, including multinational ones, to comply with these standards and to be certain that in a business environment they are considering for investment, there is a high degree of compliance with these standards? And the answer is, I think, more or less simple. Over the past decades, international investors have no longer been asking only whether a market is open for business and how open it is. They are also asking whether it is a good place for them to invest in terms of potential and actual reputational risks. Also, in terms of supply chain liability and in terms of regulatory exposure. This being said, it means that foreign investors, but I would say any investor, is considering, first of all, how an investment would not only bring it profit, but what would be the repercussions of such an investment policy for its image internationally, for its standing in international markets, and also what would be the business environment conditions in a country. So it is primarily, I would say, about reputation, reliability, sustainability of the investments, also quality of the business environment, and the conditions for doing business in a country. So that is why foreign investors, among other things, are also considering whether labor rights in a country are effectively protected and enforced, whether there are grievance mechanisms that function efficiently, and whether local enterprises conduct their business responsibly and implement human rights due diligence, whether a strong social dialogue exists between government, employers, and workers. As I mentioned, the international labor standards are primarily reflected in international conventions adopted under ILO auspices, and these are binding instruments. But apart from that, ILO is also sensitive to creating rather, I would say, ethical incentives and help international investors, but also governments and workers' organizations to ensure compliance with international labor standards. For that purpose, already in 1977, ILO, through the work of its tripartite constituents, that is governments of the member states, workers' organizations and employers' organizations developed and adopted a declaration, the so-called tripartite declaration on decent work and multinational enterprises. This is a non-binding instrument, but it refers to established binding norms and recommendations of the ILO and also best practices that, if followed by international multinational enterprises, but also local businesses, governments, and workers' organizations, would ensure an environment that is sustainable, that creates sustainable employment, decent work for all, decent living conditions, and finally, sustainable business environment for those who want to do business in this country. So this is an ethical instrument that complements primarily the hardcore international labor standards, compulsory ones, but also it complements other international frameworks that promote, encourage, and enhance compliance with responsible business conduct. Let me say that this declaration, although adopted in 1977, has been updated several times, and the last update was done in 2022, sorry. So it is a recent update, and this declaration reflects all the recent developments in international labor standards, in decent work policies, and in social protection requirements that have been developed by the ILO over the past years. So, potential foreign investors are interested to know whether companies operating in a country considered for possible investment align with responsible business conduct principles and frameworks, including the ILO Tripartite Declaration of Principles Concerning Multinational Enterprises and Social Policy. Let's call it M&E Declaration for simplicity. And in this regard, the OECD roadmap for sustainable investment policy reforms in Uzbekistan rightfully underscores the importance of RBC as a tool to attract foreign investment. In addition, we see that trade and investment agreements are progressively being used as a vehicle to advance sustainable development and RBC. They increasingly include labor provisions and make reference to the fundamental principles and rights at work, but also to the M&E declaration that refers to these fundamental principles and rights. And this is particularly the case of agreements negotiated within the European Union, the third biggest trade partner of Uzbekistan. In a similar vein, the recently signed EU-Uzbekistan Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement recognizes Uzbekistan's progress on labor rights, sustainable development, rule of law, and human rights, and commits to strengthening bilateral trade and investment in line with these priorities. Responsible investors increasingly recognize that effective social dialogue and collective bargaining are not merely labor rights issues. They are also indicators of a stable and predictable business environment, where workers can freely organize and engage in meaningful dialogue with employers, enterprises, and generally better equipped to anticipate risks, manage workplace change, and maintain productive and resilient operations. Beyond trade and investment agreements, a growing number of countries are adopting legislation introducing mandatory requirements on companies to assess and address human rights and labor risks in their supply chains. Examples from the European Union include the EU's corporate sustainability reporting and the due diligence directives, and sector-specific initiatives on deforestation, forced labor, minerals, and batteries. But these new developments are not limited to the European Union. We see similar developments in Uzbekistan's growing Asian trade partner markets, such as Korea, Japan, and Thailand. Companies sourcing from or investing in Uzbekistan will therefore face growing pressure to demonstrate that their operations and supply chains comply with these legislations that are most often based on international RBC standards. For Uzbekistan's enterprises, it is important not only to be aware of these developments, but be ready to take on this new way of doing business, aligning their policies and practices with these international RBC frameworks, thus becoming due diligence ready and using this competitive advantage to access new opportunities with global buyers and investors. So, from ILO's perspective, the question is not only how to attract more investment, but also how to ensure it contributes to sustainable and inclusive development outcomes in line with national development priorities, including decent work priorities, more and better jobs, local languages, local enterprise development that have wider impacts on poverty reduction. And trade and investment can play a key role in Uzbekistan's economic transformation by supporting productivity growth, economic diversification, and the creation of more decent and productive employment opportunities. Small and medium-sized enterprises in particular can benefit from participation in global and regional value chains through technology transfer, skills development, knowledge sharing, and expanded market access. Now, this being said, I would like to stress one particular aspect of ILO activities and operations in Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, we implement successful projects which exemplify the approach I just referred to. For example, we implement a very important program. It is called Better Work Program, which was designed and launched in the country with a view to assisting national stakeholders to achieve the desired shared impacts on decent work and equitable economic growth in the industry of Uzbekistan. The program establishes several specific measures for that purpose. First, enforce legal and practical measures to facilitate the implementation of ILO Convention 81 on labor inspections. Second, take action to strengthen operating environment for the freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining. 3, facilitate enterprise-level meetings of bipartite worker management committees. And 4, collaborate in capacity-building activities and programs that support textile and garment manufacturers to meet the standards required by European, North American, and other consumer markets. In this regard, I think ILO is practically contributing to in developing conditions in the textile and garment sector of Uzbekistan, which make it attractive both for foreign investors and also for other international partners that might be interested in doing business with Uzbekistan, and particularly in the garment and textile sector of this country. So here I would stop, and of course I would be available to address any questions you may have in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yuri. Actually, I would like to react to a point that you mentioned about the freedom and association and workers' rights. If I'm not mistaken, Uzbekistan is taking positive steps. Recent presidential decree gives the right for workers to associate in case of failure of negotiations with employers. So I believe this must be a positive development that but of course happy to discuss later in the open discussion. I would now like to give the floor to our last panelist, Mr. Kirill Korotkov, who is Commercial Director at Air Products and Chemicals. Mr. Korotkov, can you tell us from a private sector perspective, how do OECD RBC standards influence your company's investment projects, particularly in Uzbekistan? And what concrete signals from host governments make the biggest difference when committing capital?
Hello.
Kirill, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Hello, thanks Celeste. Hi everyone. I just would like to give you a little bit different perspective on what we think about RBC standards from the previous speakers, because we come here as an investor, not the policymaker, but we understand the importance to comply with all these norms. Maybe a short introduction. Air Products is one of the largest global multinational companies in industrial segment. We do supply industrial gases like oxygen, nitrogen, CO2, and so forth. And we operate in many countries, and we entered Uzbekistan 6 years back. And obviously, if the environment wouldn't be right, we wouldn't be here for our projects. So, as you may understand, we are committed to long-term strategic investments. We adhere to sustainability. We adhere to operational excellence, which means that responsible business conduct is already there in our processes. So, basically, what OECD has as its framework, it's already built in our operations. So, let's say Tengiz was mentioning 9 guidelines of OECD, like competition, environment, taxation, and so forth. So I have to say we adhere to all 9 of them, and it's basically part of our business routine. Maybe to give you an example, let's take labor relations and industrial relations. So it's 2 elements here. We take a lot of care for our employees. We do provide a lot of allowances. We basically provide with pay change cycle. We provide a lot of care, a lot of advice to our employees globally and also here in Uzbekistan. If we talk about safety also in this industrial regulations concept, we take care about safety of our employees as well. We have the policy of zero tolerance to any accidents. So it's a lot of safety trainings, it's a lot of education, it's a lot of measures looking into safety of our employees and beyond. And more than that, it's not only internal, it's also basically external concept, because what we did in Uzbekistan, together with American University of Technology, we established a safety academy. So anyone from any company could come there and basically learn on basic safety principles, which are actually introduced by a specialist in its area. So I have to say we're trying to look not only internally but also externally, and this is what we do elsewhere. If we take environment, for instance, we run project in Navoy on producing liquid CO2, which we do by carbon capture. So in Navoy, together with Navoy Azot, we capture emitted CO2 to convert it to liquid carbon dioxide. And this is by itself already a huge impact on the environment. And this is kind of core concept in our day-to-day business. If we take, for instance, anti-bribery, we have regular code of conduct trainings for all our employees, including all employees in Uzbekistan. So this is mandatory to finish. We have anti-bribery clauses in all the contracts with our third parties, be it supplier, be it customer. It's a must to have it there, and we wouldn't be able to operate if we didn't adhere to this concept. Disclosure, for instance, we talk a lot about what we do, how we do on the certifications for our products that we have, and it's publicly available on the website or on any other reference materials that you may ask. So, to summarize on this first part of your question, Celeste, we do a lot in terms of adhering to this OECD guidelines. To answer your second part on what we look in, when deciding on investment in a particular country, well, basically there are 3 elements there, I would say. One is general reforms agenda and how administrative and economics reforms are going, and I think Uzbekistan is up to speed here for last year, so we observe it with great hope and respect. The second one is government support for strategic projects, and we run quite some big projects here in Uzbekistan. One of them is Uzbek Oil and Gas, and we appreciate the support we get from all layers of the government. And I think the third one, which relates to the topic we are discussing here, is regulatory environment. And we see that most of the concepts that we are discussing here, they're already there, as Vera said. So there is basically legislation on labor, there is a legislation on anti-corruption clauses. So we monitor all that quite closely, and if this hadn't been developed, we wouldn't be here as Fortune 500 company. So that's in a nutshell to answer your question on what we think as investor, and quite honestly, we look forward to continuing our cooperation with Uzbekistan on some other investment opportunities that are yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirill. It was very useful to have concrete examples from a private sector company, and what you mentioned, especially about labor safety really resonated, and also resonated, especially with regards to Yuri's intervention about how upholding labor safety standards is key, especially for reputation in the region. There were other instances where multinational companies had to exit the market because of frequent accidents on mining sites. So this is very important that you mentioned this aspect on labor safety. And we have now given the floor to all the panelists, and I would like to open the floor to the audience for any questions. So please, I'm happy to take any comments or questions. No questions? If that's okay, then I will probably turn back to the panel. Mr. O, I was wondering if you could give us more details about the procedure when you receive a complaint. What does it look like in concrete terms, and whether you can provide a recent example, of course, keeping in mind confidentiality and the sensitivity of the topics, but it would be very useful to understand how in practice the Korean National Contact Point addresses complaints. Thank you.
Thank you. The number of cases, we call the case as a specific instance. So the number of specific instance is getting higher and higher these days. And in practice, it's very, as I mentioned, the Korean NCP, like other NCPs, we act as a mediating body and good office to make them talk each other and find some common ground. And the common ground should be in line with the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises for RBC. And it's, as the Kirill said, the private sector is quite preparing well. Their policy, which is published outside, is well organized and it's very well set up. But when we checked this ES practice is working well within supply chain, which means that kind of located under the ground, they are not well prepared yet. So always the issue of breach of certain OECD guidelines is come from the bottom of the supply chain. So in some case, the Korean company, which is a multinational company, they operate the business in like Philippines, and actually the business site is operated by the certain company within the supply chain of Korean multinational company, but the complaint could be brought to the Korean NCP because the Korean company is a multinational company. So we have to deal with human rights issues outside Korea. So which is very hard to check the fact and real stories about this breach and the accident is because we have no official investigating power on Korean NCP. So it's very hard to find the common ground. But these days, Korean company, also the multinational company located in Korea, they are getting more open to this approach of Korean NCP. So sometimes we can find some common ground, like we always publish our results of our operation after all cases done. Like Chanel Korea, there's some issue of human right and their grievance system. So we make them discuss, and fortunately, based on our effort, we reached a certain common ground, which is the company promised to develop the more program to female workers, and also make more chance to discuss with the labor unions afterwards. This kind of a commission, this kind of promise is being made through the Korean NCP, which is most recent good best practice for our real practice. And now we are dealing with several cases related to Japan and also UK, and it's very hard to resolve by functioning our all like power, but the repercussion of and the reaction of from the private sector is getting more active and very being positive on this approach of Korean NCP. So hopefully, the best practice will getting more. The number will be made more and more afterwards in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O. That was very insightful. So I think we have a question from the audience. Is it possible to pass a microphone? Okay.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting, actually. Malikum, you also do international private enterprise. So, a question I had that you discussed a lot of positive things happening around the national contact, right? But this is happening for a while now. You've been in that position, that institutions in that position, right, for a while. Do you believe that there may be some things that need to be changed, or would you recommend the same sort of practice for Uzbekistan to continue, or shall we adapt it and improve it in any other way? Like, are there any disadvantages, or you've seen some challenges that you would like to change?
To be frank, I should study more about the kind of these projects of establishment of NCP in Uzbekistan, but I can tell the engagement of stakeholders is a key. So even, as I said earlier, Korean NCP is set up in 2001, but it does not work well. So after that, 2013, we give power of secretariat to the certain dispute resolution institution. So it make certain change. That's why I talk about it as game changer. So partnership with private sector and engagement with stakeholder from private sector is very important. And so being persuasive to the market and investor from outside Uzbekistan, we should make more consensus and more common ground with the private sector. It would be kind of very key to develop this NCP in real business world, I think. Thank you.
If I may, Celeste. Yes, thank you for this question from the audience. This is very important, and I actually also thinking about this, and wanted to address this to our colleague from Korea. And because we are also in the stage, we are thinking of establishing NCP in Uzbekistan, and we are thinking to design a special regulation on that. And we actually want to know details how NCP should operate and operate effectively. And in this regard, I join your question, and thank you. And I think we will be working together, and we will telling you about Uzbekistan and what we expect and how we want to see this work in Uzbekistan. And I wanted to know, NCP, and you are a member, non-government member in NCP, and you mentioned in your presentation about establishing an advisory board, a recent board, and I think there is a necessity to do so, right? And I know all the things evolve, they develop, they change. And I believe that NCP of Korea performs well among its peers. And if you share some thoughts about it, maybe a number of claims processed and how effectively they were resolved and how you use the network of NCPs. Because those things we are actually looking at and we want to incorporate in NCP in Uzbekistan. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind comments, but we are still struggling in reality in Korea. But we have some kind of good data. So if we are willing to share our data and our stories inside with you afterwards. And you mentioned about the kind of advisory body, which is set up last year, so it's quite new, and there was many discussion about over this establishment of this board because too many voice makes them make more noise and more kind of concerns about this in practice. So some of the leader of government was very cautious about setting up this advisory board. But in Korea, there is a governmental ministry of human rights, and they recommend that it would be better to embody the advisory board outside the Korean NCP to be more neutral and to get more to be more persuasive in public. So we discussed this agenda more than 2 years, and after that we decide to adopt this board. And we had a first meeting, opening, which was the opening session of this body, but was very there are many perspectives over this Korean NCP, including the merit and also the procedural issue as well. So it would be very meaningful and helpful for developing the Korean NCP practice. But we have to deal with this kind of discomfort and inconvenience to being together with kind of this advisory board. So let's see how it goes. Yeah, I will share the experience afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see another question from the audience. Could we have a microphone, please?
Hello, I'm Guranda from Georgia, Financial Experts Corporation. I'm glad being here with you. It's not a question, it's just my opinion to share from Georgia's perspective to Uzbekistan. We don't really have NCP in Georgia, but we are hardly communicating on OECD standards starting from 2000s. So I want to share with you, and you had the same question, that what I see nowadays in Georgia. First, it is not easy. It's always hard starting this kind of structure, but it helps organizations, companies, society, and government also to grow, to be more successful, to be more, how to say, perspective for new investors from abroad, not only from the same field. So I'm sure everything would be good in your country, in Korea, also in Uzbekistan. So we're glad you shared a lot of information to us. It's always nice meeting professionals in this field. So I've gathered a lot of information about Uzbekistan market, and I'm sure I will do more with you also. Thank you. Thank you for this panel also. Thanks.
Thank you for this kind comment. Is there any more question? No? Okay, then perhaps I will draw a quick conclusion and we'll close this panel. So I think we can take away from our discussions that responsible business conduct is not just a box to tick. Sorry? Okay. So yes, RBC is not just a box to tick. It's about upholding standards and ethical practices in the long term that will also ensure a continued social license to operate and a positive reputation. It can also contribute to positive trade and investment outcomes, as was mentioned by Mrs. Bell, especially with regards to attracting capital, or by Mr. Asanov regarding exports potential. And as we heard from Mr. O, national contact points play an important role in mediation in case of disputes. And in this regard, the OECD stands ready with international partners, including the ILO and others, to support Uzbekistan in its RBC agenda as it advances on the implementation. So I would like to thank all the panelists for their time today, and please join me in applauding them. Thank you.